Let us discuss about two proportion t-test as part of this discussion. So if you look at this case study, which is Johnny Talkers, it's not Johnny Walker's friends, it is Johnny Talkers, right? If you look at this Johnny Talkers case study, Johnny Talkers soft drinks division, the sales manager has been planning to launch a new sales incentive program for their sales executives. The sales executives felt that adults won't purchase, children will purchase. And hence they have requested their sales manager not to launch the program. We need to analyze the data and determine whether there is evidence at 5% significance level. Significance level is nothing but alpha. And this is also called as type 1 error. Yeah, this is also called as type 1 error. So now, let us try to solve this. First of all, the underlying business problem is, should we launch the sales incentive program or not? That is the underlying business logic. So, the underlying business problem is, should we launch sales incentive program or not? This is your underlying business problem. The second thing here is, we need to identify what is Y and what is X. The output that we are interested in understanding here is, would a person purchase or not, right? Purchase or not. And when it comes to the inputs, we have two categories here. We have adults and we have children. Now we need to identify on what is the data type of Y and what is the data type of X. Y here is discrete. Purchase yes or no is always discrete. So we have discrete data. And when it comes to your X, this is also discrete in two categories. So your Y is discrete and here your X is also discrete in two categories. What are those two categories? We have adults and we have children. These are the two categories that we have. Now, let me show you on what test we need to perform if Y is discrete and X is discrete in two categories. If Y is discrete and X is discrete in two categories, that is when we resort to two proportion test. Yeah, if Y is discrete and X is discrete in two categories, you proceed with two proportion test. Now, let me take you to Minitab and let me explain you all about two proportion test. So here is the data pertaining to two proportion test. You have the data of adults and children and you have the data on did not purchase and purchase basically, right? So whether adults have purchased or not, that information is available and you have the data pertaining to children also. So let us do this two proportion test. Even before that, we need to write the hypothesis. So let me go to that case study and show you on how to write the null and alternate hypothesis. So here we have null hypothesis, and we have proportion of adults equal to proportion of children. What does that mean? Here we have the data on, or the null hypothesis would say proportion of adults purchasing is equal to proportion of children purchasing. And your alternate hypothesis would say proportion of adults purchasing is not equal to proportion of children purchasing. Yeah, so it is whether people have purchased or not. We are not discussing here about the quantity. We are discussing here about whether they have purchased or not. Quantity is count data. And for count data, you have a different analysis. Yeah. All right. So let me go back to Minitab. So we will directly do two proportion test. So for that, we need to go to stat, basic statistics, to proportion. Each sample is in its own column. What does that mean? You have adults and you have the data about whether they have purchased or not. That is there in one column. And in another column, we have data about children and we have data on whether they have purchased or did not purchase. We have the data available here. So, and each sample is in its own column, adults and children. So I've selected adults in sample 1 and we have selected children in sample 2. Now let me click on OK. Oh, 1 second. Let me go back to the edit window there. Yeah. So this hypothesis is not equal to, right? So if you look at this, null hypothesis says not equal to, so it's not equal to sign there. So let me go back. Let me click on OK here. Here I've changed it to not equal to, and then I'm clicking on OK. So you get the p-value which is 0. What does that mean? P-value is equal to 0. P-value 0 is less than 0.05, which implies P low, null go. That means you're going to reject null hypothesis, absolutely. And what does your alternate hypothesis say in that case? It says proportion of adults purchasing is not equal to proportion of children purchasing. Yeah, that is what your two proportion test says. So now, since it's not equal to, we need to once again write null and alternate hypothesis. And this time, your null hypothesis should be proportion of adults purchasing is less than proportion of children purchasing. And when it comes to alternate hypothesis, you have to write it in this way. Proportion of adults purchasing is greater than proportion of children purchasing. So equal to sign should always be with your null hypothesis. Just remember that. Okay. Now let us compose the alternate hypothesis once again in Minitab and let us try to get at the solution. Okay, my bad. There we go. So let me go back to the worksheet here and we need to go to stat, basic statistics, two proportions once again. And here you have adults and children. The only option that we need to change is earlier alternate hypothesis was not equal to, and now alternate hypothesis is greater than. So here it is greater than. Now let me click on OK and OK. There we go. We have the p-value now. You can either refer to this p-value or the p-value which is given here. Either way it's the same. So here we have a p-value which is equal to 1. So let me go to the worksheet and write. So p-value is equal to 1 and this is greater than 0.05, which implies p high null fly. What does that mean? You're going to accept null hypothesis, or statistically it is termed as we fail to reject null hypothesis. Yeah, so we fail to reject null hypothesis. That means we accept null hypothesis. And what does a null hypothesis say? Proportion of adults purchasing is less than or equal to proportion of children purchasing. Yeah, proportion of adults purchasing is less than or equal to proportion of children purchasing. So ultimately the statement that we're going to make here is that, or the suggestion that we're going to give to the sales manager is, please do not launch the sales incentive program because adults will not purchase, children will purchase. That is what we've proven now. Alright. So you're not going to launch, or you'll request the sales manager not to launch the sales incentive program.